morning, everyone. Everybody hear me? All right. Well, you notice I'm not Pastor Bill, but he's in Alabama, I think. But thank you, Renee. That was really awesome. You did a really good job. And thank you. All right. Well, today's big idea, Pastor really coached me through this, so you'll notice some similarities in the PowerPoint. No handouts. Apologize for that. So God has called us to a life of purpose with steadfast courage. His Spirit in us defeats the inevitable discouragement and fear. So today we're going to talk a little bit about fear. And I'm scared to death up here, so it's very ironic. But we'll get started. So that helps. Thank you. All right. So September 4th, 1929 is known as Black Tuesday. On that day, the stock market crashed in the United States and began the Great Depression. And of course, I don't know if you've ever seen the pictures. I've seen people jumping out of buildings. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of anxiety. So in 1932, Franklin Roosevelt was elected president, and he gave his inaugural speech. And he said these words, which are very famous. I wish I could say it as dramatic and as powerful as he did, but I can't. So I'm sure you've heard the clip of this. He said, "So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is," and he had a dramatic pause there, "fear itself." Now what he said next is not as famous, but I think is just as powerful. He said, "Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance." So I think what he was saying was, in order to defeat this Great Depression, we have to not retreat from it, but attack it and advance towards it. And fear was going to stop them from doing that. So it was very powerful, and the nation, of course, came through the Great Depression. I think God teaches us a lot about fear as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And the first point, so Dan, are you going to click through those, or do I need to? Okay, thanks. So the first point is, don't miss out. Fear can cause us to miss out on God's promises. And I found a couple of examples where fear caused the people of God to miss out on his promises. The first one was when he promised them the promised land. And they came out of Egypt, and he showed them great miracles, brought them out with a great deal of power and strength. But when they reached the promised land, they sent spies into the promised land. They sent 12 spies, one from each tribe of Israel. And their names are actually recorded in Scripture. So you could look at that and see who they were. But these 12 spies went into the promised land ahead of the group, and they came back, and they were afraid. And they made the whole group afraid. And I'll read what they said. They said, "They gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land, which they had spied out, saying, 'The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. They were giants, and we were like grasshoppers.'" So this is how they came back to the people, and the people responded with this. "So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, 'If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in the wilderness. Why has the Lord brought us into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?' So they said to one another, 'Let us select a leader and return to Egypt.'" So they wanted to replace Moses, and they wanted to go back to Egypt rather than enter God's promised land because they were afraid. So Caleb and Joshua, 2 of the 12 spies, tried to talk them out of this. And they said to the congregation, "The land which we passed through is exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord. Do not fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them. The Lord is with us. Do not fear them." Unfortunately, the response was not as God would hoped. And all the congregation set out to stone them. The glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the meeting before the children of Israel. So they resisted God because they were afraid of the people that were in the land. So they missed out on entering into God's promise. And I think the same can happen to us. We also don't want to miss out on God's plans. Now, a few hundred years later, they had gone into the land, and God raised up Gideon as a judge. They were ruled by judges at this time. And they were being terrorized by a people called the Midianites. And the Midianites had an overwhelming army come against them and just stole them and bullied them and terrorized them. And God said, we're going to stop this. And so he raised up Gideon, and he said, Gideon, you're going to go against them. And he gave Gideon 32,000 people. 32,000. But God said, this is too many. And they were outnumbered 4-1. At 32,000, they were outnumbered 4-1 even at that. So he told Gideon, this is too many. So he said, we're going to bring this down a little bit. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people who are with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands. Or Israel will claim victory for itself, saying, my own hand has saved me. Now therefore proclaim in the hearing of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and afraid, let him turn and depart at once. 22,000 of those 32,000 left because they were afraid. So they had 32,000 men, and God said, who's ever afraid can leave. 22,000 left. Now what happened is God actually narrowed that down again to 300 men, and they went against this overwhelming Midianite army, and they defeated them. So those 300 men came back, I would think, with great stories of God's victory. They experienced God's victory. They were part of it. They saw it, and they came back to these other men who had left in fear. And I wonder if the men left in fear had regret. Did we make a mistake? Should we have gone with God? Should we have trusted God? So they missed out on God's plans. So the second thing I wanted to say, so that was the first, so don't miss out. And the big idea again, God has called us to a life of purpose with steadfast courage. His Spirit in us defeats the inevitable discouragement and fear. So had they trusted God, they wouldn't have feared what he had in store for them. Okay, so after that, so I understand that we're not facing giants and we're not facing an overwhelming army coming against us, but we do have a battle, and our battle is a spiritual battle. And we do have an enemy, and our enemy is real, and he is against us. Right, Dan? Go ahead, Dan. Thanks. Our enemy is real. And God's word teaches us about our enemy. Be sober and vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. So he is definitely looking for someone to defeat, to destroy, to discourage. He's a deceiver and a liar. He will use deceit and lies to defeat you, to discourage you, to undermine you, to make your life difficult, to make you not want to do what God is asking for, like standing up here in front of everybody. So, go ahead, Dan. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. So he can appear to be good, but you have to be on your guard and test everything to make sure that what you're experiencing is not Satan trying to discourage you. He is a liar. You are of your father, the devil. The desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning. Does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. So Dan played that song just before the service, fear is a liar. There's a lot of truth in those words. Okay. His goal is to discourage and destroy, and he will use lies and deceit to do that. The thief does not come except to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. So here Jesus is contrasting himself, why he came, as opposed to why the enemy is here. So the enemy is definitely against us, definitely against God, and he will try to deceive, destroy, discourage you in any way he can. God has called us to a life of purpose with steadfast courage. His Spirit in us defeats the inevitable discouragement and fear. So we need to trust God to protect us from this enemy, because this is a strong enemy and a difficult enemy. Go ahead, Dan. So we're going to trust God's protection. Well, I can tell you right now, we're going to get through this pretty quick. You guys are going to get out early today. So that might be a good thing. But, all right, trusting God's protection. Go ahead, Dan. And this is Jesus speaking to his disciples. And I will pray to the Father, and he will give you another helper, that he may abide with you forever, the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. But you know him, for he dwells with you and will be in you. So Jesus promised to send a Spirit to protect us. Now we receive not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might know the things that have been freely given to us by God. Go ahead, Dan. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. So do you sense sort of a trend? God's Spirit in us is our protection against this fear. And I really like this one. He's not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. I think of power of courage, love, compassion, kindness, mercy, and a sound mind, clear thinking. And those are the things that God gives us to battle against our enemy. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. So if we're the children of God, he's our Father. He's going to protect us if we trust him. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, which is patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. And again, if we let these things grow in us, I don't think fear can defeat us. So walking in the Spirit, trusting God's promise, helps us defeat this fear that the enemy brings against us. Right, Dan? God has called us to a life of purpose, steadfast courage. His Spirit in us defeats the inevitable discouragement and fear.